Council meetings are long and boring. This is why I have invented the 5-minute meeting. All right. Ashland City Council meeting of September 15th. This one had a little trouble getting into the Zoom. She showed up about 10 minutes later. This one started off by reading his letter of concern and gratitude regarding the fire. Another one of his barn burner specials. Then the monthly COVID emergency declaration discussion. And the city attorney said, added some fire information to that declaration under Section Q. And he said, I'm adding words reminding people that the public information officer is the only person who should be telling citizens what's going on, not the mayor and not the councilors. And that's why people are upset that there's not as much information coming out. And this guy goes, I move that we continue the state of emergency declaration for another month. And, of course, that's where the city administrator and a handful of city employees just decide what to do, and there's no legally have to tell anybody why or where, how that works out. So yeah, that was all approved. Yeah, it was all approved again. And then next up, the public forum. I'm kidding. Public forum, fools. And then consent agenda. This one said, "Hey, let's talk more about that a great Sept grant that's coming up." And apparently, the city Sept guy has got a great grant that he's got get permission for. And so they said, "Oh, that's all approved." And then the city administrator's report is really just a fire recap. And the city said, guy said, "Hey, we're going to continue support for fire recovery, and he knows it's a regional issue, and they're in it for the long term." And then the fire chief gave his whole summary of the fire, and it's 27 of the 29 firefighters were in on the fight. The other 2 were out of town, and then they started in Ashland and fought their way into Talent, and then at 1 a.m. they handed control over to the state guy who came in and took control of the whole county teams and the other city teams. And then the police chief said, and he's super proud of his team, of course. And then the police chief said he's super proud of his team, and then he started by evacuating homeowners, and they stayed ahead of the fire, and they evacuated people in Talent and then into Phoenix, and then they had that dead body on the Greenway. They came back and they're investigating that as a homicide still, and the police are now helping patrol Talent and Phoenix for looter security and stuff, and they're looking at and they're investigating the Alameda fire as an arson investigation, so they're still on that. And the city beard guy said the public works employees, who's I'm super proud of course, they did great stuff, and they helped redirect and monitor traffic and move things around throughout the entire thing as things changed, and they put out spot fires here and there too, because they had the opportunity to do that. And then Parks and Rec guy, super proud of his team, and he's in charge of housing during an emergency. And so he tried to find housing for city employees who lost their homes. And he looked around at SOU and OSF and the hotels. And apparently Ashland Springs or Ashland Hills, one of those two was super helpful, had some rooms. And then the Ashland fire guy said, Nixle went great. It was very helpful. It put out a dozen or so alerts went out, and instead of we had 8,000 subscribers before the fire, guess what? It's up to 14,000 now. Shocker. And then he's still working on passing out information to the state teams, and he's formally vetting information, and he's updating the website and working with the Chamber of Commerce on information. And then the city administrator said, we're going to debrief all of these people later, and everyone's going to summarize the things that happened, and we're going to look at all the stuff that, didn't work out and how to change things and all that kind of stuff. And then this guy goes, hey, by the way, the firefighters from our sister city, Guanajuato, came, but I told them that they can't just show up here from Mexico and just join our firefighters. So they hung out, and we had lunch, and I did a CNN interview, and boy, what a great gesture that was. And then there's a fire chief's retiring on November 1st. So there's 3 options, and the city recommends option 3, which is a short-term transition, a temporary chief for 1 to 3 years. And apparently option 1 was just keep going and try and find a full-time chief for life. Or option 2 was have the county fire chief take over as our chief. And then this guy goes, hey, I move we let this number 3, let the city look for that short-term chief. That's all approved. So apparently city staff has like a month and a half to get a new fire chief. What could go wrong? And then, new water curtailment rules. Stage 1 enactment, and there's a new maximum water usage rules. And the city beard guys said on September 3rd, the city stopped using TID water because it was low and gross and was too hot and filled with bacteria. So they're about to turn on the tap line, which comes from guess where? Ashland comes from Talent and Phoenix, right through there, and they were going to start that on September 8th, which was a fire day, and so that destroyed that line. So now we're just stuck with Reeder Reservoir water, which comes down from our watershed, and that's it. And so the city administrator said, we did this once before, this mandatory stage 1 in 2009. And in 2014, you remember, they did a voluntary version, and that was super successful. And then this one goes, hey, why don't we just do that voluntary one again? That was so great. And he goes, sorry, I'm a little late. We already implemented this thing. And then this guy goes, hey, I looked at it, and then that stage 1, the maximum usage is still pretty high, so only knuckleheads would be upset about it. And then this guy goes, this one here goes, hey, if people thought it were voluntary, maybe they feel like they're helping more. Okay, and then that was all approved. And then a rent control price gouging discussion. So this one says, hey, after the Paradise fire, citizens trying to get apartments in the city of Chico next door got price gouged real hard. So they're trying to keep short-term ordinance to implement rent controls. And the city attorney said, I think there's lots of rules against price gouging already. And how much government intrusion do we want to do anyway? And there's probably going to be constitutional issues. And then the city administrator said, well, there's a governor just had an emergency price gouging order a couple of days ago, and this is going to cover everything. And this one goes, yeah, I did look at that, and I agree. I think that's probably going to cover what I was going to talk about anyway. And so this one just said, hey, this is a longer-term state issue, really. And then this one goes, hey, we should make sure that we have renters' rights as online info as easily findable as possible. And this one says, hey, I found out that mobile homes cannot be insured for fires, so no single mobile home was allowed to have any insurance. I'm like, wow, that was crazy, but true. And then the city attorney said, oh, by the way, the city administrator can just do an emergency rent control, but there needs to be proof of a problem first. And then the city administrator said, FEMA is coming in a couple weeks and dealing mostly with the county, and so they're probably bringing temporary houses somewhere, and it's going to be super slow, and the city just needs to be engaged with the county and the region and be ready, because they're not going to be talking right to FEMA, so they're not certain exactly how it's going to go down. That's it. End of meeting. You're welcome.